had this conversation all month long titled You Better. And what we're doing is we're essentially having a conversation about the commands in the Bible, primarily some of the commands that Jesus gave. So like Jesus gave these commands because if you grew up in church, you may fall into this category where you kind of think Christianity is just a matter of saying, okay, Christianity is just a list of do's and don'ts. That's pretty much it. And if you have enough do's that you did right and you didn't do too many things wrong, you get into heaven. And that's actually not what Christianity is, but that's what many people tend to believe. And then you get some people who claim to be Christians going around making people feel guilty and shameful and beating them up with what they think the Bible says, and that's just not right. So for this conversation, make sure that you're not distracting each other. If you have your phone out, you should be taking notes, and you don't need to show those notes to anyone else because that could be shaming them for not taking notes. Don't be a shamer, okay? So I want you to pay attention to this message, and it's titled, You Better Raise the Bar. Somebody say raise the bar. Raise the bar. So if you're taking notes, you can put that down. You better raise the bar. Real quick, how many of you grew up doing something when you were young, like 5 years old, that you're still doing? Anyone still doing the thing they did? Maybe it was dance or softball, a sport of some kind, an instrument of some kind. I'm seeing some hands. Cool, cool, cool. How many of you started going to school when you were 5 and you're still going to school? Awesome. That's great. So, yeah, so in essence, everyone has done this thing. So check this out. Maybe I'm going to apply it to baseball. When I was growing up, I started playing baseball at the age of, I don't even know. Really, it was when my brother was playing and I was too young to play. I would be at his practices practicing. So I would be in the back of the outfield, and they didn't really have a fence, so if the ball got by them, I would run and go get it. And I would throw it in. When my brother had games, I was at the games, and you know when I would cry? Not when I was running out of popcorn or something. I cried when they cut the lights off and the game was over. That's what I was like, no, come on. Like baseball was my jam. That was my thing. So when my time came and I started playing for T-ball, I played for the Athletics. No big deal. No big deal. So I played for the A's in T-ball right here at Broward Park in Hope Mills. And then after T-ball, I went to coach pitch and I played for the Rebels. And after the Rebels, I played for the Red Sox. And I got the chance to play for some all-star teams. I then got to play for Hope Mills Middle School, the Vikings. Any Hope Mills Middle School Vikings, formerly known as? Anyone go to Hope Mills Middle School? No one went to, okay, two of us. Okay, good deal. Hey, me and you and Peyton, I know you went to Hope Mills as well. And then after that, I got to go to Southview High School. And I tried out and I made the baseball team at Southview High School. And it was a good time. We went back-to-back conference champs, no big deal. But here's what I learned. I learned that as I kept progressing, it seemed that the standard of how to play the game was progressing too. Anyone ever experienced that? Like when you started something at the age of 5, like maybe if it was dance, they said, okay, plie, right? I don't even know if this is a plie or whatever, but like plie. And so you're just at 5 years old, so you're just doing like air squats. You're like, yeah, Mom, right? Are we going to Chick-fil-A after this? Like you're just excited to be there in your mini skirt and everything, like the leotard or whatever you get. So you're excited. And then as you get older and like you're 10 years old and you go to plie like that, the coach is like, no, right? And she's probably Russian. I don't know, because it seems like every movie has a Russian dance instructor. I don't get it. But so she's like saying, that's not how you plie. Now all of a sudden, it's like the same kind of movement, but you should be adding some extra stuff to it. Like your hands should be doing some stuff. Your hips should be doing some stuff. Your toes should be pointing in certain directions. Your torso. Like, they didn't lie to you, but the standard somewhere between the age of 5 years old and 10 years old changed. So now for my baseball fans, any baseball fans real quick? You grew up, you at some point played baseball? Cool. All right, this is for us. Softball include? Yeah. College World Series is going on. Y'all, I love the College World Series. Wayne Carolina's in it. They're not in it, so I don't really love it this year. But here's what I learned in T-ball. In T-ball, and I got to watch Lennox play T-ball this year, and that was an experience. It was great. In T-ball, you're kind of just told to hold the bat, choke up on the bat, shorten your stance, elbow back, hands back, step forward and swing level. So it looks something like, if you do everything the coach just said, it looks like this. Now, when you go to watch the Braves play, ain't nobody on the field looking like this, but this is what it translates when the coach says, all right, keep your feet apart, hands together, elbow up, hands back, right? All these things and swing level. That was like the standard at T-ball. But by the time I got to middle school, there was a certain look that the baseball players had when they were in the batter's box. And when I was out in the field, I knew when I needed to pay attention. I knew I could look at how they got into the box and say, okay, this guy knows what he's doing. So like, for example, if they got into the box and they were doing something like this, they were digging in, I got a little nervous. If they asked for time from the umpire, I was like, uh-oh. If they had white batting gloves on, it's like, oh, hey, fellas, back up, back up, way back. And all of a sudden they get in there and they just look overly confident, like they're looking into the pitcher's life and all of his bad choices. And all of a sudden they just look real confident, and they have like a little bounce to them. A little, like my coach for T-ball said nothing about looking like this at the tee. But all of a sudden, from T-ball to middle school and high school, the standard changed. And all of a sudden I realized that somebody at some point had raised the bar. They didn't lie to me. It's just that the bar was raised. All right, one more example, and then we'll get into what this is all about. As you may know, because of the story I've told in the past, batting was not my thing when I played baseball. Okay, so don't like try to catch me on July 6th on the wiffle ball field saying, hey, yo, Josh, let's see what you got, because batting was not my thing. Defense was my thing. I was super excited. I am not even going to try to brag, but I am going to tell you what happened. There was a time when I was playing for my middle school. I was also playing for a travel ball team, and the coach of a rec team said, hey, will you play for us? I was like, nah, man, I'm already doing too much. He said, well, can you at least do this? Could you please come and like just take some infield and show our team how to play defense? I was like, yeah, man, I can do that for you. But here's my thing. When I was in middle school, my defensive stance was something like this. Like, you know, be ready, be on your toes. Even Lennox's T-ball coach was saying, hey, guys, ready position, day one. It was like, ready position. Now, Lennox's ready position was like this. So he could not really go anywhere quickly. But that was it, like eyes on the batter, and I'm facing the batter, my gloves ready, my hands ready. In middle school, my ready position was similar. So it's not like they lied to Lennox, but now I was like this. So I'm on the balls of my feet, I'm paying attention to the batter, and my glove is ready. But I noticed that when I got to high school, there was this varsity second baseman who was legit. And I just watched him the first couple practices. I was like, what is this guy doing? Because he would start during fielding, he would be at the edge of the grass. And as the pitcher is winding up, he starts taking some steps toward the batter. And then as the ball is approaching the batter, he would do like a hop and then get into the same position that I was doing in middle school, but he got there differently. It's almost like someone at some point between middle school and high school had raised the bar and said, here is the new standard of how you're supposed to play defense. And for those who are on a baseball team, you understand that whole process and premise of how to approach the ball on defense. So here's my point. Isn't it true, don't you remember this, that in math class, at one point, you were taught how to solve that mathematical equation, and then you struggled learning how to solve it that way all year. All summer, it was in question on which grade you were going to get to go to because of how you struggled with that equation all year. And then they actually promoted you to the next grade. And you walk into class, you sit down, and that teacher tells you, hey guys, that equation from last year, here's actually a very easy and quick way to do it. And it's not that they lied to you last year, it's just that they raised the standard. And that's why in 10th grade, you're not learning the same stuff you did in first grade because they raised the standard. So what's the point of all these rules in the Bible? Well, when Jesus showed up on the scene, all he did was raise the standard. So tonight I wanted to take just a couple minutes to look at 5 of the times he raised the standard. So if you're joining us, here's one thing we have said. We've said that rules tend to be put in place because someone somewhere got hurt. So there's a rule on the Carter baseball field when me and Lennox go into the yard. Lennox, if you're going to swing the bat, put on your helmet. Why? Because the boy crazy, okay? He can't control everything, so I don't want him to swing around and hit himself. And if you're thinking, Josh, how in the world could someone swing a bat and knock themselves out? You haven't been around the game of baseball very long. So keep hanging out with some baseball players. They're stupid enough to do it, okay? But check this out. Here's what Jesus did in Matthew chapter 5. He goes on this sermon that he's giving, and he essentially says, hey, guys, you've heard this in your past. You've heard this rule. You've heard this command and this you better. Well, I'm going to raise the bar. It's almost like Jesus stepped into the batter's box, put time up for the umpire, got very comfortable, and said to these guys, here's what you've heard. And here's what he said in verse 21. You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, you shall not murder. So just real quick. Now, if you've done this, you don't have to confess anything, all right? You can plead the fifth, all right? You can just hold up 5 if you need to. But do raise your hand if anyone in the room has committed murder. Security, right? Security, get in. I'm just kidding. But check this out. He says, if you shall not murder. Now, raise your hand for this one too. Do you agree, or have you ever heard that you should not murder? Anyone ever heard that? Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, you shouldn't do it. If you were on the fence about it, it's really not the move. And anyone who commits murder or who murders will be subject to judgment. So real quick, another question for you to raise your hand. How many of you believe that if someone commits murder, they should be judged for the murder they committed? Yeah, I think it's pretty fair enough to say, like, if someone has lost their life, we should probably have a conversation about what happened, okay? So now, that's what Jesus said. He said, you've heard these things before, no new information. But check out verse 22. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. So just a show of hands one more time. How many of you have ever been angry with someone? Yeah. Okay, cool. So essentially, here's what Jesus did. He took murder and he raised the bar by saying murder and anger are the same. I'm counting anger as murder. This is the new standard. And we just all confessed to falling short of the standard. So let's say for the next couple minutes, we're going to do a little self-assessment. And I want you to give yourself a score on if you have fallen short or if you have accomplished each of these things Jesus said. So if you fall short, give yourself a 0. If you do it, you're like, oh, I haven't done that, give yourself a 1. We're good? All right, let's see how many points you end up with at the end of this thing. 5 would be a perfect score. 5 and you're Jesus, okay? Let's go on to the next one. He goes on to say this. You have heard that it is said, you shall not commit adultery, which is having sex with someone that you are not married to. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. So reading that, you thought at the beginning, oh, I get a 1, until Jesus stepped up and said, you know what, I'm going to raise the bar. So he says, I'm counting lust as adultery. That's kind of mean. That's tough, Jesus. It absolutely is. But he wasn't done. Check this one out. The next one, he goes on to say, it has been said, anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce. And that was true. Moses said that. That's been a rule that they've lived by for such a long time. And then Jesus raises the bar and said, but I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife except for sexual immorality makes her the victim of adultery, and anyone who marries a divorced woman commits adultery. So he just took marriage and divorce and he raised the bar. Josh, what's the issue? Like, why is Jesus like calling out all these things that they were so used to? Here's the reason. Because divorce hurts people. Anger hurts people. Lust leads to sexual immorality, sex outside of marriage, and it hurts people. And Jesus knew a very, very long time ago that someone, somewhere is going to get hurt if you're not living to a higher standard. It's one thing to have your government set a law, but it's another to live above morality. And that's what Jesus was trying to get them to understand. So here's why he wanted to make divorce so important. And if you've been through a divorce with your family or someone that you know of, a friend, you know this. Divorce hurts people. People you care about. It's not just that when the couple separates, that's where it ends. No, it's everyone around them that's close enough to them, they get impacted by this. And Jesus knew that divorce hurts people, so he wants to make sure that you know, going in, when you go into the covenant of marriage, take marriage seriously. The only way that you should get out of that marriage is when there is sexual immorality, because now that person is saying, I'm putting sex above the person I made this promise with. And Jesus says that's going to hurt people. So please don't go on hurting people. Don't just think that because you throw a party and say I do means you're going to be able to. Instead, take time to understand the promise you're making with this person before people get hurt. And maybe during that conversation he paused real quick and he looked at the guys he was talking to and said, are there any questions? Okay, let's move on. Final two right here. He goes on to say this. Again, you have heard that it was said to the people long ago, do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made. So real quick, you can answer this one. Have you ever said a sentence like this? God, I promise you that if you will do this for me, then I will do this for you. Lord, I promise if my parents don't find out, I will be at squad next Wednesday. On my life, Jesus. So just real quick, have you ever made some sort of promise like that? Some nodding, some I've definitely met that. Jesus, if you could just get me out of trouble, Jesus, right? So here's what he said to that when it comes to making oaths. But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne. So here's what he's saying. Don't make a promise to God like that, because this isn't your world. God created this world. Think about this. Let's talk about your bodies for a second. Please raise your hand if you selected your height at birth. Anyone? Yeah, no, I know I didn't, because I would have come out 6'5". I'd already be 6'5". I already had the things with the deal, and I'd have been linebacker looking. Right? That would have been me. If I got to choose all the things, my hair would be different. My looks would be I would have shifted some things. Jesus, can I get a say in this? But it's not my world. It's God's world that he called me into, just like he called you into. So here's what Jesus says. Don't make an oath. Instead, here's all you have to do. All you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one. So let's just do a quick Bible check to see if that's even true. So anyone that has ever made an oath, don't raise your hand, but just think, those times that you made an oath to God, like, God, if you will get me out of this, I promise you, were you doing that because of something bad you were trying to get your way out of? And you're trying to avoid a consequence? It's pretty much. Yeah, so you could see right there, you're trying to avoid the evil in it. So it kind of checks out. And here's our final one before we close for tonight. You have heard that it was said, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. To which you would respond, but Josh ain't no punk. And to which I would say, here's what Jesus was saying. Don't retaliate. Because when you retaliate, you're going to build the anger that leads to the hate that causes someone to want to harm someone else. So Josh, what's kind of the point? Here's the point. It'll be on the screen for you. The act, and all these actions that Jesus was talking about, the act begins with the heart. Before you ever do anything, it starts with an emotion you feel. Before you ever wish someone was dead, it started with the anger you had for them. Before someone ever decides and behaves sexual immorality and they have sex outside of marriage, it started with an emotion they felt when they lusted after something they could not have. And Jesus is saying, how about you take control of all of those things now so that no one will get hurt later. So Jesus, across the board, raised the bar. But you guys are in high school. So can I ask you a question that's kind of difficult for many people to respond to? Check it out. It'll be on the screen for you. If I'm hearing this, I'm asking, what kind of loving God, Josh, sets the bar too high? Something I like to do is watch videos of Christian apologists when they're in debates with atheists and people that don't believe in Christ or believe in faith, and the discussions they have. And that's kind of a question that many people ask. Like, how would a loving God, why would he have these things called sin anyways? And the quick answer, just like off the cuff, would be free will. If we didn't have free will, we would just be like robots going around doing things, right? We wouldn't be people, right? We wouldn't have like free decisions. But check this out. Here's my response to that question. So if you have a friend that maybe ever asks this question, like, what kind of loving God sets the bar too high anyway? Here's my response to that. That Jesus was talking to people when he set the bar that high. He's saying, if you love God and you love people, then you're going to strive to get to that standard. You're going to live up to that standard. You're going to do your best to love people. Because you know what happens when you love people? Come on, you know this, guys. Yeah, when you love God and love people, you know what happens? You don't murder people. You don't lust after people that would cause you or them to have a sexual failure where you have sex outside of marriage, and now that's what leads to rape. Like, you don't do those things because you have love for God and love for people. You won't have a divorce that's painful in your home because you're trying, like we took all the time before, and we want to make sure that we're going to care for everybody. And I know that things don't work out, but we want to make sure we take it seriously because we don't want to hurt people. So while some people will say, how could a loving God set the bar too high? I would say, well, people that love God and love people will try to achieve those things every day. But check this out. A God who loves people will assume the punishment for those who fall short. So that question that many people struggle with, that maybe don't believe in faith, they don't believe in God, and they would say, well, how can a loving God set the bar too high that no one can achieve it? It's like, well, a loving God would set the bar that high so that we would try our best not to hurt each other, but he sent his son to assume our punishment for when we do fail. And that is what we call the gospel, the good news. That's faith. And when you live that way, when you follow those you betters, you become better. The world around you will become better. But if you act like the world around you when there's anger and violence and conflict and you just give in to it, no one and nothing becomes better. We all go back to the same ugly standard that we all started with when we didn't really know what we were doing. It's not comfortable. It's not fun. But when you love God and you love people, you can change the world. So just one last question, squad. Will you please start changing the world and realize that it begins with you, in your home, with your siblings, with your friends, and see what God will do through you? Let me pray for us. Hey, I'm Josh Carter. Thank you so much for stopping by to view this message. If your next step is to receive Christ as your Lord and Savior, we are so excited for you, and we want to help you take that next step. So jump in the description and click those links to find out what following Jesus is all about, what that means, and of course, what's next. And if your next step is baptism, we would love to schedule that for you. So just go to CrossPointe.church, select next steps, and get baptized, and fill out that application, and we will schedule that day with you. So super excited for you. But again, thank you so much for viewing this week's message. Have a great day, and God bless.